All right, folks. And now it's time for another Mark Renard show and tell. Show and tell hour. Although I'm going to don't be alarmed. I shall abbreviate this particular video. It will not be an hour. And if it was an hour, there would probably be 99.8% of all viewers will have bailed out after the first minute. I want to say 1 to 2 minutes. A lot of people will at least give you maybe up to a minute to see what the fuck it is that you're even talking about. But once they have figured that out, they will either immediately scroll on to something more interesting, or they will perhaps give you the benefit of the doubt and listen to a little bit more, but surely will not watch it to the end. I'm under no delusions as to how many viewers can endure my videos. When I try to edit some of my videos on my YouTube channel, I can barely stand watching them myself. So, what's the lesson therein? There should be a lesson in there for me. Okay, having said all of that, boy howdy. What do you think of that, folks? Bet you haven't seen anything like that in recent memory. And a neck to match. Thank God I have the neck, the original neck, which also has the sort of dark ruby red marks on it, on the sides and on the back of the peg box. Folks, what we have here is a violin, in my personal opinion, very, very likely, if not almost certainly, made in Mittenvald, Germany, around, let's just say, between about 1880 and about 1900 or 1910, right in that little window there. And Mittenwald an der Isar, Mittenwald on the Isar River. This is a full-size violin, as you can see, in quite terrible shape, but it's got a lot of cracks. Those cracks will be able to be repaired, but not without a considerable amount of effort, if I may say so. Fortunately, no cracks on the back, but we have a very much better than average curly maple back, book matched 2-piece back with some pretty decent figure in it. I have not done an extensive search on the explanation behind why some fiddles such as this exhibit such what might be called unorthodox, perhaps even extreme varnish patterns. It almost looks as though whoever was in charge of varnishing the violin on that particular day was taking his thumb, dipping his thumb into a varnish a container and going, going like this. And indeed, this particular fiddle is only one of two I have ever seen. I take that back. I did see a third one for sale online, which I tried to buy, but I missed it. Someone else got to it before me. But there's only three in my entire lifetime that I've ever seen that exhibit this kind of strange pattern. Now, I must report kind of an odd fact. The very first gig that I ever played professionally, I would have been 20 years old. Let me clarify. I played other gigs before that when I was as young as 15 and 16. I played bass in a little band in coffee houses and community centers, youth group events in community centers. Back when I was about 16, I was in a couple different bands back in those days. One of them was called the Tasmanian Devils. Another one was called Zoo. Z-U. Zoo. And, but the very first gig that I played on the fiddle was when I was about 20 years old in Columbia, Missouri. That gig actually occurred at a Roadhouse bar that used to be outside the city limits of Columbia. Whether or not that bar still even exists, I would be incredulous in the extreme if it still exists in any form whatsoever. As a bar, or perhaps bar and restaurant, if it still even exists. It was a pretty large place, actually. It was called the Gladstone. Perhaps some of you out there in the world would remember such a place outside of Columbia, Missouri, in the mid 1970s, early mid 1970s. But that was the location of the very first gig that I ever played on the fiddle, and it was played on a fiddle kind of similar to this, that had speckles all over it. The only one of two, this being the second one, the only one of two that I have ever owned. That fiddle was a little different than this one in that most of the varnish was a sort of a dark, ruddy, ruby red color. Not even really ruby red. It was more like just a dirty red color, an intense color, but very subdued and rather darkish. But you could still see on top of the ground varnish, you could still see gobs and gobs and gobs of these thumbprints. Obviously, a signature of whoever was varnishing it was probably using their thumb or something. They did not look like, on the one back in the old days, those spots did not look like brush strokes. They were distinctly oval shaped, very much like this fiddle. Oval shaped, as if someone had used a fingertip or a thumb and dipped it in a little bit of varnish and pressed it quickly onto the fiddle, just like that. Well, this fiddle, back in Columbia, Missouri, this would have been circa 1973, late 1973, possibly early 1974. I used to be in possession of the only known photograph of me playing that particular gig, and there's the old Mittenvald fiddle there. Now that fiddle, I don't remember where I bought it from. Don't remember. But I had an old buddy back in Columbia in those days. His name was Norman Merritt. And Norman and I were really good buddies. We were even roommates in the same house for a good while. But Norman, Norman coined the term the Old Mittenvald. and he'd always say it just like that. The Old Mittenvald. And, yep, I really loved that fiddle. I owned it for just, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years, something like that. And believe it or not, wouldn't you know it, I actually ended up selling it to my buddy Norman Merritt before I moved away from Columbia for good. And when I moved out to Arizona to start out my to start a new life. And I'm quite certain that Norman would never, ever part with that fiddle. And I'm quite sure he still has it and owns it to this very day. Kind of a famous fiddle. Famous in the sense that it used to belong to me, having been used as on my very first gig in my entire fiddling career was played on that fiddle at the Gladstone Bar, just outside the city limits of Columbia, Missouri, circa 1974. We can only sort of speculate as to what the varnish master was attempting to accomplish, or what kind of mood may have possessed him to impart this kind of technique to the varnish on this violin. If we know that there were more than one, and I know of 3 such examples where this kind of technique was used, if we know of 3 examples in the world, there certainly were more. There could have been dozens and dozens of examples of this kind of work. Why someone thought that this was an attractive or desirable technique or pattern to put into the varnish on an instrument, one can only speculate. I think it's cool because of its sort of historical, its place in history, latter 1800s, Mittenwald, Germany. I think it's cool just because of its historicity, but you have to. One would have to agree that this is pretty freaking bizarre, pretty fucking weird. To be honest with you, pretty fucking weird. Now, what we have here is actually a pretty decently made Stradivari pattern A Neuner and Hornsteiner violin from Mittenvald, Germany. Neuner and Hornsteiner was among several shops that were actively making in Mittenvald around the same exact time. Many thousands upon thousands of violins were produced. Now I've seen quite a number of Mittenvald fiddles that were entirely this sort of light amber color, with none of this other funny business. But I've also seen their signature varnish was what some have called their oxblood varnish, and it's this same sort of very ruddy red color. The darkest part of this ruddy red color, you would see entire violins varnished with, in that color, so they would have a much more somber, darkish look to the whole instrument. But I've seen many, countless Mittenvald fiddles that were more of this light amber sort of a theme. I've owned this violin for a very long time. I'm thinking at least 20 years, maybe more, and it had just sort of lain dormant in the cabinet. But as I was looking for something else actually when I came upon it again, and I have decided that I need to get off my ass and restore this guy. It would be fun. It would be way seriously fun to get this old speckled bird up and running again. Yep. So that's about the long and the short of it, folks. I won't belabor the point. The old Mittenvald. Have a wonderful day.